Proof of stake is a phrase that people actually say meaning two different things. So one meaning of proof of stake is you have some kind of stake in the process, and you have to prove that you have that stake to do things. So for example, in the Hashgraph, we could have our voting, but instead of counting how many computers voted yes, we count how many coins are owned by the computers who voted yes. So we're weighting the vote by the stake that they have. That kind of proof of stake you could do on top of any of the 5 technologies. You can do proof of work with proof of stake in a certain sense. There's lots of different ways of bringing it in. However, of the 5 technologies for DLT, the 5 ways of building a DLT, one of them is actually called proof of stake by some people. That's kind of confusing. I call it economy-based. What you're doing is building a simulated economy where people have to gamble real money when they're making their consensus decisions. So maybe everybody votes on a consensus on some kind of yes-no question. And if you vote with the majority, you get more money. And if you vote differently, you lose some money. And so everybody is financially incentivized to try to get together and have a consensus. So Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market is all driving us to consensus if we want to make money. But you're not a person, you're a computer. What if you're infected with a virus and the virus is designed to make you want to lose money? Or what if I'm infected with a virus that doesn't care about money, it just wants to be disruptive and stop us from coming to consensus? And what if it isn't a virus? What if it's a firewall that partitions our network into 2 halves and they each come to a consensus, but it's a different consensus? Well, that's bad. Now you can double spend. It's a disaster. You can't have that. So these are the economy-based systems. They have no proofs. They're not Byzantine fault tolerant. Not even in the bad sense of partially asynchronous. They're just not Byzantine at all. And the problem is we're trying to harness the power of a real-world economy, but hoping that we don't get the instabilities and chaos and unpredictability of a real-world economy. But that's a problem. Real-world economies have booms. They have crashes. Could you ever mathematically prove that the US stock market will never again have a crash? No, you could never prove that. And so it's very hard to prove things that are secure in these markets. And that's the problem with these economy-based systems. Many people, when they say proof of stake, though, they mean economy-based system. And I like to distinguish the two because proof of stake actually just means you prove you have stake. And all the 5 systems can do that. And Hashgraph can do that. And there's uses for that. Stop Sybil attacks. It's very useful. So we have the 5 technologies. The third of the 5 technologies is the economy-based system, where we have a simulated economy, and everybody is doing a simulation of the economy, but you're playing with real money. So maybe when you vote, you have to gamble some money on your vote. And if you end up voting with the majority, you get money. If you end up voting against the majority, you end up losing money. In that case, everyone has a financial incentive to vote with the majority. Everyone's trying to have consensus, and we have Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market pushing us all to consensus. Beautiful. Unless, of course, someone has a virus, and we don't want consensus, and we want to lose money because we're infected with a virus. And a computer can do that, and they can be very disruptive. Or if there's a firewall that partitions us, it can be very disruptive. So that's the problem. We're harnessing the power of the market economy, but we inherit all the instabilities of the market economy. They come together. It's a chaotic system. And you could say, well, what about game theory? Oh, game theory? With more than 2 players, you may not even have a Nash equilibrium. And if you do have a Nash equilibrium, it may be p-space complete to find it. We, with rational actors but have limited rationality, may not be able to even calculate the Nash equilibrium. Game theory says this is really hard. That's what game theory says, to prove anything. So we're dealing with an unstable system. It's like comparing a trading pit where everyone is waving a piece of paper, the commodity traders, and screaming in each other's faces, and there's total chaos, as opposed to Hashgraph is more like a boardroom. We're all sitting around a table and calmly discussing it. And so in Hashgraph, we have mathematical proofs that we will all come to consensus, and as long as less than a third of us are bad, we're guaranteed to come to consensus, and we'll all agree. We will not have stock market crashes. We will simply come to consensus. And if we have partitions, then If it's really bad partition, then we all just take a coffee break and wait until the partition heals. We don't come to a false consensus. It's really just calm and orderly and mathematically guaranteed to work, as opposed to the trading pit and the instabilities of a market. That's the third technology.
Did you have something else you wanted to add?
The fourth and fifth.
Oh.
We had the earlier question that we were in the middle of.
Oh, sure.
Although I can skip fourth and fifth because I don't have pictures for them. We only have 3 pictures. Maybe I can just stop there?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll stop
The
there.
fourth and fifth being
Voting and virtual voting.
Yeah.
Actually, although I can go through them quickly, maybe it's good to have them all with the same background and same lighting if you want to make a parallel clips.
Sure. Okay. So
Let's do that.
Yeah.
There's a fourth technology, which is pure voting systems. Pure voting systems involve sending votes over the internet about yes/no questions, and then we all collect votes from each other, and then we all send out receipts and collect receipts. So I make sure you're sending the same vote to everyone. You're not, being duplicitous and sending one vote to Alice and a different vote to Bob. So we have to send out these receipts, and then we all collect them, and we change our vote based on what we see, and then we go through another round of voting, and we go after round, and then eventually we come to a consensus. This is a very old technology, decades old, strong math proofs. You can have Byzantine fault tolerance. You can have purely asynchronous, the best kind of Byzantine fault tolerance. You know that all sorts of attacks will fail on this. It is extremely strong. You can even have fairness in some sense. And nobody's ever implemented it in the real world, to my knowledge, and actually used it day to day in a real system. People are talking about systems that have some voting in them, but they have other stuff too. Because a pure voting system is horrendously inefficient. Nobody will ever do it. The problem is that if there's 1,000 of us, I have to send everybody a vote. Now there's 1 million votes going over the internet, but you have to send receipts. Now there's 1 billion votes going over the internet. That's just one round. Then we do multiple rounds. That's many billions. And that's for one yes/no question. If I want to put 1 million transactions in order, I might have a whole bunch of yes/no questions. The whole thing becomes horrendously inefficient. So that's the voting systems. They're horrendously inefficient, but boy, the math is beautiful. You get really strong security, but it's useless. Except there is a fifth technology. The fifth technology for building ledgers is a voting system with no votes. That's what Hashgraph is. It uses virtual voting. We just send each other messages to know what the transactions are. Everybody finds out the transactions exponentially fast at the speed of gossip. We all know the transactions, and each message we're sending has a bunch of transactions and a signature and a tiny bit of extra information, just 2 hashes. And given that tiny bit extra in all of our messages, we suddenly know the complete history of how everyone talked to everyone. Given that complete history, we are able to run one of those horribly inefficient voting algorithms, but without any votes. I know so much about your history and what you know and when you knew it and what you know about what Alice knows and what you know about what Alice knows about what Bob knows, that I could actually predict how you would vote if we had one of these voting algorithms. So I'll just pretend you did, and you don't have to send me a vote. We're done. And so all we do is we gossip out super fast, very resilient, as fast as you could get across the internet, all of our transactions. When you send me a transaction, I keep it, and then after I get a few more transactions, I just suddenly know what order this one goes in history and what its timestamp is. I just know. Because I do all this virtual voting stuff in my head, no need for any talking to anyone about consensus. We just know we have consensus. And it's not like my probability goes up over time. I just know. Guaranteed, and there's math proofs. That's virtual voting. Hashgraph is the only system that does that, and it's incredibly fast, but we get the incredibly strong math proofs from the voting systems.